The firestorm that erupted over the grand jury's decision not to indict a police officer in the death of Eric Garner has cast a harsh spotlight on the NYPD. But the mayor says things are changing.
And the training that's going to happen here in this building will change the future of this city.
The Eric Garner chokehold death in Staten Island still reverberates across America. Calls remain out for law enforcement everywhere to be retrained in how to react to such events and how to use less violent force. But there are those who understand the reality of life in uniform and on the street who believe such efforts just might be a solid waste of time. Let's dig in. Welcome back, former NYPD officer and law enforcement analyst and blogger, John Cardillo joins us today. John, pleasure to see you again.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Ed. Great to be here.
John, here we go, because there are people who say that this is necessary because the cops, not only in New York but everywhere, need to understand what they do, how they do it, how they then work in a community. But plenty of other people, including you, say this is unnecessary. Why is that, John?
Well, look, training is a great thing. This training is completely moronic. This is all theoretical, no practice. They're using 1989 Patrick Swayze film Roadhouse, where he plays a bouncer who tells his other bouncers to be nice, put it in quotes, and this is what they consider tactical training. They have a $750 million brand new police academy with simulated streets and hallways and apartment complexes, and they're not engaging in tactical training, but theoretical, feel-good, politically correct-based theory training, which I think is simply ludicrous, and the cops are laughing at it.
Well, wouldn't you agree, though, that there is a certain amount of theory training, as you call it, that officers need? Because a lot of it is not necessarily physical. There's a tremendous amount of psychological that goes on here.
Well, yeah, but there are already trainings that are part of the NYPD's ongoing curriculum. The verbal judo program, which instructs police officers on how to engage someone or many people in the public and diffuse a situation verbally. And so I think this is redundant, but this is also dumbed down. At least in the case of verbal judo, there's some solid science behind it.
So wait a minute, John, I'm going to back up a little bit. Tell us what you mean by verbal judo.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ed. So verbal judo is the actual name of the particular course. It was implemented back there when I was there in the 1990s, and I know Commissioner Bratton's a fan of it. And cops are telling me it had been implemented in the years since. And I believe it is currently or will be again. And basically, it just teaches police officers how to have a verbal engagement with someone and use your verbal skills to diffuse what might escalate into a physical confrontation. So this is something the department has done for decades and continues to do already.
But does something like that actually work? And I'm going to ask you only because I talk to many police officers, and you see a lot of what goes on. It would seem that anymore we have reached a point in our society where when most people are approached by a police officer, they immediately take on a defensive posture. They are immediately in the arrogance mode, if you will, arrogance of cop, and they believe that they can get away with it, and they do try to push as hard as they can and as far as they can to see how far they can get before the cop breaks, yes?
Well, sure, right? There are some people that are just bent on escalating an altercation. What something like verbal judo teaches is to diffuse those situations where that might not go there. For example, it teaches you to say, "Hi, I'm Officer Cardillo, NYPD. The reason I pulled you over is." Now, that's not a bad tactic because that not only diffuses a situation, but it might also save a cop's life, because if you're pulling somebody over who just robbed a liquor store and is armed, and you say, "The reason I'm pulling you over is this red light," their tension level comes down. Now they don't think they're being felony car stopped. And so that works in that regard. But you're right, Ed, when somebody's bent on escalating, engaging the police, videotaping them, and they're doing all they can to incite, very little will bring that person down until they get their desired result.
All right, now, according to the New York Post, a lot of this training, they said during the training, officers fell asleep in their seats. 8 out of 10 gave the $35 million program a negative review when they finished. This, of course, cites the usual anonymous high-ranking NYPD official. All right, so what then should they be teaching at this point? If this is all so wrong and so useless and it's a waste of money, what do they need to throw out and what do they need to put in, John?
Well, look, the reason the cops are saying that about this, and I spoke to a lieutenant, a sergeant, and detectives and police officers who had the same response. It's ridiculous. This is a joke. Those were their responses to me. Because what this is doing, they feel this is insulting their intelligence. This is telling them, if you're in an African American community, don't be racist. If you encounter an agitated person, be nice. I mean, that's common sense. And so what cops feel, and what several criminologists I've spoken to feel, is what's needed is tactical training. The issue at hand was, did Officer Pantaleo use a chokehold on Eric Garner, and did that result in his death? Well, you've got these new state-of-the-art facilities at the academy. Let's train officers in simulated scenarios where larger, aggressive, unarmed assailants approach them and teach them the hand-to-hand combat tactics necessary, or teach them how to diffuse a situation verbally, but when you're confronted by a physically aggressive, larger assailant. And I've always been a big proponent of introducing more non-lethal solutions in NYPD. One of the few departments where rank-and-file cops still aren't issued tasers as non-lethal options. Only supervisors are.
But what do you do when the non-lethal doesn't work?
Well, when the non-lethal doesn't work and the person has escalated to deadly force, you pull your firearm and you defend your life and that of others. By all means.
Is it not necessary, though, John, to understand, certainly the public needs to start learning a little bit more how to deal, because, as I said, there's been that arrogance that's in here. But is it not fair to say, though, that the NYPD, any other police department, they still need to do a better job of kind of weeding out the troublemakers, what I call the bullet heads? Because let's face it, there are guys and gals who get into the police department and they want to do it because it's a great way to carry a gun and be tough.
I'm sure there are, but the psychological selection process is pretty effective. And to go back to an earlier point you made, there's a couple of great videos circulating from Maricopa County, Arizona, and Houston, Texas, where their departments, Sheriff's Department and Police Department, respectively, brought community activists in and put them through simunition training, simulated firearms training with simulated rounds. And in those instances, those community activists both shot unarmed people, drew their weapons very quickly and fired. So that's an excellent tactic, bringing vocal community leader, community activist types into these simunition trainings. I do think that
got about 15 seconds.
Ongoing retraining, Ed, I think continued psychological eval and ongoing retraining and tactics would be a more effective solution than what we're seeing.
And stop wasting the money, I guess, and stop putting the cops to sleep when they're getting trained. That'd be a good point to do it. John Cardillo, always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. We'll stay in touch. Talk again soon.
Great to be back. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks a lot. An American jury weighs in on Palestinian terror. Chris Christie may be watching as his chances at a presidential bid slip away in the court system. That and so much more when MidPoint continues.